Hey, fight fans, welcome to the breakdown of UFC 204. We're going to be talking about the Count Michael Bisping versus Dan Henderson in Manchester, England, and all of the night's finishes. Stay tuned because the UFC After Show on AfterBuzz TV starts right now.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AfterBuzz TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
I mean, that was one main event. I was a little worried when he got knocked down a few times. I thought it's like, he's about to have his Cinderella story end at home. That was crazy. Yeah,
sure.
So what's up, fight fans? Welcome to the UFC After Show on AfterBuzz TV. I'm Gabriel Gonzalez. You can find me on Twitter at @GG on TV. And tonight I'm joined by the amazing panel. First, the Joe Rogan of AfterBuzz TV, Mr. George Hermoza.
I feel like I'm unintentionally at first, but now I feel like I gotta keep going. Just showing up for the pay-per-view. So yeah, UFC 205, George Hermoza, GHERMOZA, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, PlayStation Network, all the above.
And of course, our jiu-jitsu expert, Mr. Chris Howard.
George Hermoza doesn't get out of bed for less than 10 grand. So,
Hey, neither does Joe Rogan.
So I'm Chris Howard. You can reach me at Chris Howard Live on Twitter and Instagram. Also, go to legendarylivingdaily.com for daily tips, motivation, inspiration, and legendarylivingtv.com for YouTube.
See, I thought it was Chris Howard Live
It's live.
Oh,
this whole time.
There's meaning to that.
we learn something new every day. Yeah, and of course, guys, Christian Cole will be back with us next time. Give him a follow on Twitter at XChristianCole. So, guys, 5 rounds, and everyone is saying the same thing. Did you expect it to go 5 rounds with these two, especially 7 years later after that epic knockout at UFC 100?
I mean, we all remember that highlight knockout from UFC 100, July 11, 2009. Because how can we forget? They replay it over and over again. Even before this fight was announced, it was one of probably the most viewed knockout, highlight in the history of UFC. Knockout of the night, knockout of the year, pretty much all everywhere. So we've seen it. We've all seen it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was not expecting for it to go 25 rounds. I thought I was going to expect, ironically, I thought I was going to end with Bisping knocking out Henderson in some way. I know
Did you
he
really?
was, yeah. I just thought it was like one of those where it's like, wow, what irony. But you know what I mean?
With a heavy right.
Yeah.
I actually thought he might get him done an accumulation within 3 rounds, maybe. We know Henderson's chin isn't exactly what it used to be. He's not as durable. We've seen that in recent fights, but I didn't expect it. What about you?
I thought it was a fun fight to watch. Hendo, when they talk about a puncher's chance, he always had
Definitely.
that every moment of it. You didn't know right up until the 5th round who it could have gone anyway. But it was clearly a war of attrition. Working Hendo down to gassing him. And the going into the fight, what I thought was really cool was Bisping had a lot of variety in his game, very well-rounded. And I think it was really, more than anything, a game of heart and spirit on Bisping's part because he just didn't let the pain phase him.
No, definitely. Well, I mean, when we look back at the first fight, I think what made it, the most epic knockout, they had all that build-up, and the knockout happened on the biggest event in UFC history. And so it was like that perfect storm to make it that one that lives on highlight reels. But let's get to the big question, scoring, because there's some people saying it should have been Henderson. How did you guys score the fight personally?
I personally would have been shocked if Hendo would have been given the nod. Like
Think so?
I was rooting for Dan Henderson. Obviously, a lot of people were unless you were maybe British. But I don't know. It's just one of those where I think it all came down to cardio. Mm-hmm. I think that 3rd round where Hendo was just gassed, and you can easily tell. I wouldn't say the word coasting, but you can easily tell he was mentally preparing himself for rounds 4 and 5 by taking round 3 off. A lot of people thought that maybe he should have won round 2, but I think as much as I was rooting for Hendo and wanted to score it for him, I think that knockdown was just a little bit too late.
Definitely.
Maybe like if it was maybe a minute earlier, obviously I think it would have made a big difference. But round 3, it was obvious for Bisping. Round 4, like you can tell that, and even so, like that nut shot, I guess you can say, it was more so Hendo taking as much time as he can to get his win back, and I think that hurt him. And Bisping has been always known for being cardio. Like that's a guy that can go. Like you're not going to see him breathing out of his mouth for pretty much almost ever. So I think when it all came down to, I think Henderson was probably I guess this is going to be an oxymoron, probably the better fighter overall, but just his cardio was just not up to par with Bisping's.
Definitely. I get what you mean with the second round, and I guess that's why the one judge scored it 49-46 for Bisping. I actually had it 3-2, like the other judges 48-47. I gave Bisping the last three, and I do think Henderson stole the second round on damage. That big right hand. I thought he might get him out of there. Chris, how did you score the fight?
I thought Hendo had round 1 and 2
for the knockdown.
Yeah, and I gave 3 and 4 to Bisping, but I gave 5 to nobody. I didn't think 5. I thought, I think that was kind of pretty much a tie, a wash. So I would, if it was left up to me, the fight would have been a draw.
Would have been a draw?
Yeah.
Okay, that's not unheard of.
I mean,
for
a lot of people
fight.
were probably thinking that the first round might have been even a 10-8. Hence, if that were the case on for the most judges, it would have been a majority draw or maybe a unanimous draw. But again, I was
like Frankie Edgar, Gray Maynard.
Yeah, I mean, I really was rooting for Henderson, but it was just so hard to score it for him. Just because of not being biased. I want to be biased, but as like a
we're here
I guess
to
you can say analyst.
Hey, we're here to say let's speak
as
the
an
truth.
Analyst, I mean, I just had to speak from the with my brain and not my heart, and I really think that Bisping did more work. And again, a lot of people are saying it's controversial. I don't think either Hendo would have won. I don't think it would have been much controversy. I think the right person won. Yeah. And again, it's not about the damage. It's about who won the most rounds. Bisping got his ass whooped that first round.
Oh, he did.
But I mean, and that's where the most of the damage came. But if Bisping wins the next 4 rounds, and guess what? That's MMA. That's how you score MMA fights. It's not just.
Exactly. What do you think at the end though, when they were going to raise Bisping's hand and they called it out? I think that Hendo thought there could be a chance that he actually won the fight. Did you?
I think once they said it was 49-46, I knew they were going to score for Bisping. Just because I think there was no way that Henderson won
by 49
4 rounds.
4 out of the 5.
So once they said 49-46, then I knew that. But I was like, maybe.
I gotta say this: I didn't expect the 4th and 5th rounds to get closer because I do feel Henderson did a lot better. Bisping still won them. We saw the stats, the significant strikes and overall strikes favored Bisping again, and it's hard to argue against Henderson did more damage. It's like the numbers speak for themselves. He didn't drop Bisping after the 1st and 2nd. But I was surprised at how much more active. I think Bisping wasn't ready for Henderson to start moving forward. I think he expected to do more of the same as he did in the 2nd and 3rd. But definitely, I mean, credit to Dan Henderson. Let's get out of the way. A brilliant mixed martial arts career. Let's break it down. He held 2 titles at the same time in Pride, essentially their equivalent of middleweight and light heavyweight. He was the Strikeforce light heavyweight champion before they got absorbed by the UFC. One of only 4 guys to ever beat Fedor Emelianenko, and he did it in Hendo fashion. I mean,
I would have
loved.
And
he represented the United States twice in Greco-Roman wrestling.
Yes, in the Olympics.
I mean, there's many reasons why I would have loved to see Dan Henderson win, but one of the reasons why I would love to see him to win the UFC belt, just for the sake of he never lost any belt ever. And I go, obviously it's not his fault. I'm sure he would love to defend the Pride and the Strikeforce, but I mean, by the time that he was a champion, not too long after that, Pride and Strikeforce kind of failed to exist. UFC. So pretty much he would have been the last Pride and Strikeforce champion, then been the UFC title that he never lost. So
I think one of the things we have to remember is that age gets to you.
It does.
I think so. I think his age was a lot of what was gassing him, and we don't talk about that too much, but it's tougher the older you get. It's tough to go the distance, and especially it's going to take a toll on the cardio.
And here's a guy that been in some wars. I mean, here's a guy. I mean, I can't even that first fight against Shogun Rua.
Oh, that was epic.
Oh my God, that is. Man, it's hard to name one fight as the greatest fight of all time. And again, as an analyst, I can make a strong argument for that being the greatest fight. I mean, in my opinion, it's that Jones, Gustafsson, and Melendez versus not even that. Melendez versus Sanchez. Yeah,
that was another great one.
But yeah, that fight with Rua, and going back to some of his career highlights, a lot of people talk about the Bisping. I loved his lockout of Vanderlei Silva. Because everybody's always expecting the right hand, but out of nowhere, here comes the left hand that knocked out Vanderlei Silva, and that was Vanderlei still in his peak.
Oh yeah.
So that was a huge big deal.
Definitely. I mean, Chris Howard, do you have a favorite Dan Henderson moment?
Boy, no, I mean, I just see him as a warrior. He's been battling for a long time, and he's been in some legendary battles, and he's gotten the distance. So it's, they're saying this is his last fight. We're going to see, and I think
so, because he's been hinting at it for a while. I think he wanted to retire at 199. It was too good of an opportunity to pass up.
His last fight against Lombard was supposed to be his last fight, but then it's like, hey, we got this championship fight. How do you say no to that?
Oh, yeah.
And the truth is, he had a very, very good chance of taking the fight. So it's, like I said, this could have gone either way at any moment, even way deep into the 5th round. I think.
Even so, what was I about to say? Oh my God, I literally had a thought right there.
Don't you hate that?
Something about Bisping, Lombard. Oh, pound. Okay, so in my opinion, one of the best pound for pound fighters of all time, because in my opinion, when you think pound for pound, you think, not just the best fighter, but I think of a guy who can fight in multiple divisions. Here's a guy who fought middleweight, light heavyweight, and heavyweight, beat one of the best heavyweight fighters of all time.
Yeah, and Fedor.
And obviously after that, we would have loved to seen him fight maybe more heavyweight fights, but guys were a lot bigger than him. But again, my opinion, like you talk about, the John Jones and the Anderson Silvas, and obviously Silva being up there since he's fought at light heavyweight and been successful light heavyweight. But here's a guy, Dan Henderson, that multiple divisions, successful in Pride when they were like the top company in the world.
Yeah, he was one of the warriors in the early days. He was there fighting every battle there was there, and he was one of the best.
And you got to give him the credit. I feel like he is kind of the last guy of the old guard, that had those fans, that he made fans out of people at the same time as Chuck Liddell, so he was part
Randy
of bringing
Couture,
that era of fans into it, and he's still around competing against these guys. We never did get to see him against John Jones.
And
I always thought
UFC 151.
Oh, yes.
We were so close.
I know. And also, that was him coming off the fight with Shogun. That was going to be a fun one. But yeah, when you think about the fact that he fought Quentin Jackson for the light heavyweight title, Anderson Silva, all the battles he had with Fedor, he got the Strikeforce title at, I think, was he already at 40 years old at that time, I think?
Yeah, it must have been, because it was under 6 years ago.
Yeah, that's just amazing. So congratulations to Dan Henderson on just a brilliant mixed martial arts career.
I'm sure
Going the distance.
Yeah.
Even Rocky lost his last fight, didn't he?
It's true. It's
Spoiler
true.
alert. Whatever.
No, but the night did belong to Michael the Count Bisping. I gotta say it, I'm the only guy I think I've ever met who actually was going for Bisping 7 years ago at UFC 100. And I feel like I was the only guy going for him yesterday, but
quite frankly, I'm surprised he didn't go down for the count in this match, because he got hit. He got rocked.
He did.
The fact that he was able to make it through that after taking such a solid shot, and then when Hendo jumped on him, he was just landing shot after shot after shot. And to see Bisping come back from that as if it didn't even faze him.
I mean, it's what won him that fight essentially against Anderson Silva earlier this year. Just that attrition, just that heart. I mean, we know he's got great cardio. He's a very well-rounded fighter. We hardly ever see his ground game, but everyone says it's there. And certainly he's always had great takedown defense as his career's gone on.
See, that's one thing I was surprised that Hendo didn't look to take him to the ground, because he did have pretty good control when he took him down right away.
That was one of those things, though. I feel like that's just kind of left Henderson's game lately. I feel like it might be injuries at 46 years old that he masks very well, but, going through to really take down these bigger athletes, younger athletes, maybe that's part of it. But I agree, because
when you're a guy who's like a 2-time Olympian, something just got to come natural to you, and some of the age just never goes away. And who knows? Like I said, maybe you're probably absolutely right. But Bisping is so, what's the word I'm looking for? Confusing to me.
Is it because he's abrasive?
No, nothing with his personality. I've learned to appreciate his personality, because I think deep down he's actually a really good guy. But he's amusing to me, because here's a guy that, like, you would think that at his career right now, I've said it before, he was always a guy to me, the gatekeeper. He was always a guy where it's like, let's see if this guy's worth being a top guy. Put him against Bisping, and because Bisping would usually lose. Obviously a lot of people thought that he didn't really win his fight with Silva. A lot of were screaming shenanigans. And here's a guy that, like, in some ways, his jaw and his heart has gotten better throughout the years. Like, usually it's the other way around. Usually it's everybody always says, man, the guy doesn't have the same jaw he used to. Man, the guy's getting older. Man, the guy's heart, or cardio isn't gotten. But he's gotten, like, I don't want to say better, because I think that it's all about his matchups. But I don't know, he's just so fascinating to me as far as like, here's a guy that everybody counted him out a couple years ago. Now he's literally has this win streak over Anderson Silva, Luke Rockhold, Dan Henderson. Now he's obviously the middleweight champion of the world.
He beat Talis Latus leading up to that too. CB Holloway.
He was looking really good all the way through the fight too. He looked very mechanical. See, I thought he fought a good mechanical, proper fight with good technique. He maintained the distance really well. He was able to move around and put the pressure at the right times on Hendo to keep him from being able to land that big right. I thought that Bisping fought an interesting fight. Hendo looked off balance, looked like he was...
I think he looked like a fighter who's only looking for the big right hand,
right,
honestly.
exactly.
And he didn't ever go in there with a plan B, but then again, he didn't need to when you see the damage he did. But I was really impressed with how Bisping was able to pick him apart. He was very disciplined. He did have the jitters. A lot of people were talking about that, and I agree. He looked like he almost wanted to headhunt a little with Henderson in the first round, but he had to settle in. But
Bisping even admitted that he was one that's like, dude, like, and you know, much respect, and you know, obviously you don't want to, you kind of want to save face, but I mean, you can tell that knockout from 7 years ago rocked him.
Oh,
like,
sure.
Not just physically, but mentally. And you know, what do you think? Like, this is the same guy that did that to me.
And then you got to think, after taking those shots in the first round,
deja vu.
You would think that would rock him, but it didn't. His psyche was in the right place all the way through it. He's like, I don't care. It's he was living with that discomfort, and he dealt with it very, very well.
He stayed disciplined. He was playing to that Manchester crowd when he walked out there. But then again, I guess I'm going to give him a pass because, let's be honest, how often are you going to get that kind of ovation in your life as a prize fighter? Don't do that again, though, because I don't think he'll get lucky twice being distracted like that. Now, he had a lot of things to say about the top four in the middleweight division, which, you know, the man still knows how to cut a promo after all these years. We're leading up to these matchups. The first one is going to be Chris Weidman versus Yoel Romero at UFC 205, which we'll be talking about later in the show. And then later in December, we're going to have Jacare Souza fighting Luke Rockhold. Who do you guys think is next right now when we're looking at these fights coming up?
First off, I wish Bisping would actually look at the camera when he's talking. Get it? Because his eye is like looking the other way. I honestly, like, I feel that Yoel Romero, and again, we're going to talk about it probably in a little bit. We all seen that rankings mean nothing.
Yes.
But obviously Yoel Romero has probably been ready for a little bit. I know he kind of came off a loss not too long ago.
Well, he beat Jacare, but that was also the one where
I'm sorry. I'm thinking Jacare.
Jacare,
I know
yes.
I said Yoel Romero. I meant Jacare. I think Jacare. He just came off a loss.
He lost to Romero, but then he had that win over Vitor Belfort, 198.
But I still feel like Jacare is the guy. He's ready. He's been ready. He's a machine as far as jiu-jitsu goes. I mean, I'd love to see him at least get his opportunity. I want to just see these guys at least the same way Bisping got an opportunity finally after all those years. Don't let the same thing happen to a lot of these guys that are just, you know, you've had Weidman. We've seen what Weidman and Rockhold and Vitor can do at the top. But I want to see how Jacare does, you know, in that spotlight.
And what I like about it is that Jacare, he used to be just a real great jiu-jitsu guy. He's added knockout power. I mean, he's certainly no Anderson Silva, but he packs a punch, and he's really made a lot of strides in his striking game, and I think that's what makes that a great matchup. Luke Rockhold, he's another guy who's hit his stride, though. He did have that setback, obviously losing to Bisping, but I think it's going to be a great fight. So would you say Jacare, if he wins, should get the nod over, let's say, the winner of Weidman and Romero?
When is Jacare?
It's
Rockhold?
In December. They're headlining, I think, a fight night on December 10th.
And we've seen this happen before, like especially in the heavyweight division. I'd say whoever looks more impressive, if Jacare or Romero both win.
Okay.
Because Romero has been, before that whole USADA thing happened, he was looking amazing.
Yes.
Obviously against Tim Kennedy, he looked like a killer.
Yep, and he put away Machida pretty handily.
Yeah. Obviously, you know, controversy aside.
Yep.
But again, I think, and we'll see how Romero bounces back. Obviously, You know, a lot of things. Maybe he had to. And who knows? It's this whole USADA thing. Maybe it might change the way he fights. So we'll see. I know Jacare has always been up there. So like I said, maybe who knows? Maybe Weidman and Rockhold will win and throw everything off. You know.
I mean, I would want to see Weidman because I feel like there's gonna be just that extra level of trash talk from Michael Bisping. Yeah, Luke Rockhold, but then it's still the third one. It's hard to keep a rivalry like that fresh as far as sound bites, but Bisping has always had a lot to say about Chris Weidman, so I think that would be fun.
When it comes to Weidman, he kind of falls in the same category as like Cain Velasquez. I want to see how this guy can do when he's healthy for a long period of time.
Definitely.
Because it's hard to believe in guys like Weidman when they just keep getting hurt. The only reason why Bisping's champion is because Weidman got hurt.
He is. And he almost didn't make it to UFC 205. It was like the last minute addition to the card. Let's talk about the next fight in the middleweight division because we had another guy who might even just creep his way into the conversation. Gegard Mousasi finishing Vitor Belfort in the second round. I think the most telling part of that entire fight was when Belfort just had that opening flurry. He looked like he was going to try to take him out in just signature fashion, and it was going to be the end of any talk about a decline, and Mousasi just kind of shook him off like, nah, that's not about to happen tonight for you, Vitor.
Yeah, Mousasi was a technical machine. He just he dominated that fight. He ruled it, and he was so cool all the way through it.
He was. I mean, he was definitely the more disciplined fighter. He was very patient.
Yeah.
Sometimes that works against him, I feel, in fights. Like Machida, I feel he was a little too patient. And then obviously at the time, Machida was just looking great at 185. But yeah, he just really picked him apart. He picked his shots well. He didn't want to get into brawls in the center of the octagon with Vitor. He knew that wasn't, going to be in his favor.
It looked like he wasn't even phased mentally through the whole thing. He was like, all right, okay, we'll go.
Yeah.
All right. He was just cool. He was cool.
Definitely. What you think, George?
I say this as a big Vitor Belfort fan. So again, this is me taking away my biasness and being, trying to be an analyst. There are two Vitor Belforts.
I was going to say, just like Joe Rogan.
Yeah, I was going to say, you look a little like Joe.
I know, the hair.
Yeah.
There are two Vitor Belforts.
Yes.
And we all know, we're not going to deny it. There's pre-TRT, or there's TRT Vitor Belfort, and there's post-TRT Vitor Belfort. We obviously saw just a significant difference in his first post-TRT fight against Weidman. Back May of last year, and you're like, man, like it really shows. And now we're like, well, let's see if it's just not just physically, but let's see if now he can actually fight. And there's just he's not the same guy. He is not the same guy.
The reality is, if you have low testosterone, it really affects the system. I've got low testosterone, so I take testosterone, and when I don't, it depletes me. I mean, I've got nothing in me. So that'll rock somebody's world if they're meant to have it to get even to normal levels. They don't.
When you look at it, he used to be able to just knock the bricks off of dudes. When you look at what he did to Bisping and Rockhold and Henderson, he was just like a freight train. There was no stopping him. After that, we talked about it. Definitely UFC 198, I feel, was the first one where we really saw that, without that extra power, he gasses out very quickly. He still doesn't seem to. He used to vary his game more, but he looks like to really just try to unload early rounds. But I think that, like you said, post TRT, it's just hard to deny that there is a difference, and I think that we are starting to see just the decline of Vitor.
The age once again.
Yeah,
and it's not even that. Like, he's not even that old. Considering
he
Henderson.
Started young,
But exactly like you just said, he's got the experience, and at some point that is going to take a toll on you. The knockouts, the cauliflower ears, just the roll around. Like your body's going to ache a little bit more than it used to, and it's going to take longer to recover. And I think with that and the training and not being the TRT anymore, I think that's finally taking a toll on Vitor. As much as I hate saying it, because again, I'm a big Vitor Belfort fan.
Oh, me too. I was going into this fight wanting him to win, and then I slowly began to change my thoughts about it and thinking, Mousasi's playing a smart game.
No, I mean, when you think about it, he's another one of those guys. I mean, he's been fighting since he was 19 years old. I mean, one of the first UFC highlight reels showed him just blitzing Vanderlei Silva in Brazil. I mean, this is a guy who's been around. He's been there, left, and come back and dominated for a while.
I remember when he was first starting and he had those hands and he came out the gate. Was it Frank Trigg he was fighting, or who was he fighting? Where he came out just with a straight blast.
That was Vanderlei. That was the Vanderlei Silva highlight.
My God!
Yeah. And to Vanderlei had a good, at that point in his career. But no, so Vitor...
I feel like it's like maybe like the second or third to last fight of his career.
I would agree. I think they're going to give him a good matchup, certainly, but I think outside of the top... I wouldn't say maybe outside the top 10, but certainly out of the top 5.
And the reality is there's a time to bow out. There's a time where it's like, okay, that's enough.
Now, Gegard Mousasi, I mean, the way the middleweight division is right now, I wouldn't be surprised if we see him... maybe fill in if one of these guys in the matchups we mentioned they get injured. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him step up and try to get in there.
I mean, he was really close to fighting Daniel Cormier at UFC 200.
Yeah.
Obviously, if it wasn't for Silva, but yeah, he's a guy who so much potential, but he's up and down, up and down. I mean, again, no disrespect to Uriah Hall, former call-in guest of AfterBuzz TV, but like he's a guy that nobody thought he would lose a Uriah Hall.
No. And he was winning that one before he got caught in the second round.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. And then again, fights against Machida and whatnot. And it's
and he beat Dan Henderson. Although controversially, but he also has that victory. But he's gonna be around. I wouldn't. Maybe Anderson Silva in Brazil. I know they're trying to look to bring the spider back in something.
Yeah. He mentioned that's a fight he wants.
Yeah,
that's a rumor that we're probably going to talk about in a little bit about rumors about the next Anderson Silva fight.
Certainly. I mean, but rankings, it's right there. We're going to talk about that, but it looks like that's in the cards probably for Mousasi. Let's talk about OSP versus Jimi Manuwa. I mean, that knockout, guys. That's one of those, like, do you remember Lyoto Machida Rashad Evans?
Yeah.
That's what it looked like watching it, and it was like, just damn. I mean, and OSP coming off that loss to John Jones for 5 rounds, he's that guy. He's kind of taken the Ryan Bader role in the light heavyweight division, I feel like. We all know he's big, long, athletic. He's got power. He can hit some takedowns. But just these guys who are on the rise seem to be able to just blitz right through them to get to that next level. What'd you guys think of that fight?
2 strong guys. I mean, they came out, like, I was just watching muscle on muscle pound through, and it was a pretty wild fight. The knockout really stood out in my mind, though, when, did you see his leg fold underneath him as he went down? That was just like, how somebody's leg go like that without being broken?
Leg
Shades of Krokop against Gabriel Gonzalez.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, and OSP was winning the first round, I felt like. He was using his size well. He was just really imposing his will. But Manuwa...
Yeah, what happened in round 2? Because he changed his strategy, right? He came out and started fighting a different fight. He was landing the leg
kicks, and that started to slow down OSP. And it looked like he just caught him with that hook that it didn't look like it landed flush, but it landed on the right spot that just seemed to shake him and slow down OSP. And I thought... damn, he's about to get the comeback. And then he hit him with that. He dropped him with the right hand. OSP went down, got back up, and then Manuwa just finished the job with that left hook.
But the left didn't even look that powerful. That was the thing. The right hand hit him solid. Then he did like a left jab right that he missed, and he came back with the left hook, but it didn't look solid. And he went down. I think he was already out before that.
Oh, yeah, he definitely was. I think he hit him on the spot, and it's just crazy to see a guy as big as OSP, and it seemed like he took his time going down.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, that was just a great win for Jimi Manuwa.
Yeah, I was not surprised that this fight did not go to decision.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, I never really been that impressed with OSP. That's why I was a little shocked when he got that interim title shot against John Jones, but obviously, there's nothing you can do about that.
They talked about he was just honestly was the only guy who wasn't already signed to fight another guy and healthy.
Exactly. It was like by process of elimination. That's the only reason why he got the interim title shot. And even so, like he didn't look. When everybody was talking more about how John Jones didn't look, or how he didn't look good, as opposed to OSP looking good against John Jones. It's like, as much as you like OSP, like, I don't know, just you never really think of him as a top 5 fighter.
I don't either.
Jimi Manuwa coming in, he looks impressive most times. Sometimes he's had a couple down slides, but I mean, I was very surprised and not surprised, but very impressed by Jimi Manuwa yesterday.
Well, definitely. I think we're going to see him in a marquee fight next. Certainly. I mean, when you get a knockout like that over a name like OSP, I think you set yourself up to fight the guys, in that mid-level of the light heavyweight division, your Ryan Baders,
or who knows,
possibly
maybe
Glover Teixeira.
Maybe if everything goes well, as like we heard with the rumors with John Jones, maybe that'll be John Jones' next fight. I don't see John Jones coming back immediately and getting another title shot now that everything's happened. But who knows? Maybe Jimi Manuwa might be a good, stepping stone for either one.
Certainly. Well, okay, so let's talk about it because I want us to get through to predictions tonight because we're going to have a lot of fun ones to talk about. But the skyscraper, Stefan Struve.
Oh my God.
Help me out with this. Chris Howard fighting Daniel Omelinchuk.
Omelanchuk. I knew how to say it earlier. Omelanchuk.
But if you're a guest, you feel free to just choke one of us out when you come visit us, Daniel. I'm ready. No, but that was another one. He stood his ground with Stefan Struve. I mean,
in the beginning.
Yes,
yeah.
And you know what? That's exactly what you got to do if you're gonna take out a guy. Like when we've seen guys like Pat Barry try it, it's like you really have to get in his face and try to make that incredible reach advantage he has a non-factor. And certainly Daniel was trying to do that, and I think he was even surprising Stefan because Stefan went for the takedowns and showed off that ground game that we're not used to seeing. Chris Howard, analyze let's go to the second round real quick. What do you think of Stefan Struve's Darce choke, how he set it up?
I thought it was fantastic. And the thing is when you grapple with a guy that is that tall, it is challenging. It's not easy because they can stretch you out. I mean, I trained in London with Roger Gracie out there, and he's and Roger's really tall. He's not 6'11.5", but he's a tall guy, strong. And when you grapple with him, he's like a wet blanket. He just lies on you and he can stretch you out and do pretty much whatever he wants to do. So that height really does come to an advantage. And I thought there was good grappling, the ability to stretch him out. See, I think it was what's the name of the short Omelanchuk.
Yeah,
that's it.
Omelanchuk.
He had a tough match there for him. So it was like he was Jack trying to figure out how to cut down the giant. And so he went in, and at first he was screening the punches, and he was able to get a few in, and then just looking to chop him down, but chop him down into territory that he wasn't going to be able to continue the fight. So
definitely. Well, like I said, Struve, I think could he still have won the fight on the feet? Possibly. I mean, it's Stefan Struve. He's a good kickboxer, but I think he also knew that he had a more well-rounded skill set, and he just decided that take the safer route, and certainly it paid off for him because it got a great finish.
He climbed. He just worked his way through, worked his way right around any type of guard that was there. He was able to. He dominated the fight without a doubt. I think he would have won it either standing or down.
Definitely. All right, George, I want you to help me out with the last fight of the night. We had Mirsad Bektik versus Russell Doan. I mean, Bektik, he just looked like he was in control of that from start to finish in the first round. I mean, he had the good takedown. Doan got back up, but it seemed like it just wasn't his night from the start. What did you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Bektik just looked good from the beginning. I mean, here's a guy who obviously a lot of these guys who, especially Bektik, nobody's heard of before. So obviously, in some ways, that is a motivating factor when you know that there are a lot more eyeballs on you.
Yeah.
Obviously on the pay-per-view, on the main card. So I think he definitely showed up. He wanted to put on a good show, and I think he made a name for himself at UFC 204.
Definitely. I mean, like when the lights are on, it's like, hey, you know what? I just gotta come out and kick some butt. I like it.
He's strong. He's young. He has a big career ahead of him.
Because I mean, if anything, there's always you look at a lot of these guys, with the exception of guys obviously like Brock Lesnar or whoever, but everybody starts at some point. A lot of people forget that John Jones was on UFC 100.
And the prelims, he didn't even have a televised fight that night.
Not
That's
even.
crazy.
A lot of people forget about that.
It's
here's
a
a guy
journey.
who started from just same as these guys.
Yeah.
And then controversy aside, look at him now.
Yeah.
One of the most polarized, but one of the most known guys in MMA.
Yeah.
But again, everybody's got to start at some point, and I think a lot of people should look at that and be like, you know what, that can be me someday too.
No, I mean, I think even Conor McGregor had a quiet night when he had his debut in Ireland, so, a few years back. But definitely, so fight of the night was Michael Bisping versus Dan Henderson. Performance of the night went to Jimi Manuwa and Yuri Alcantara with that finish on the prelims.
That was cool.
That was pretty sick.
I like Brad Pickett. He's always been one of my favorite fighters, especially some of the smaller guys. But That was pretty cool. I couldn't even deny that.
It was just sick. I mean, all right, so I can't wait to see what happens next for Michael Bisping. I think the trash talk is going to be fun no matter who he fights, but he gets the job done in his hometown of Manchester, England, and I think it was just a fun night. The pacing was good on this card. I mean, we had a lot of quick finishes, first, second rounds, but then we had a nice battle for 5 rounds in the main event, so no complaints. It was certainly just a great night of fights. All right, so we've had so much news since our last show, so we're going to go into our news and gossip with our new segment, the UFC Quick Hits.
AfterBuzz TV News.
All right, so last time, I incorrectly reported it just because it seemed like everyone did. The main
blame
event,
it on them. Blame it on them.
Okay. I mean, Dana White was tweeting, no, that's not the fight. UFC Tonight said it wasn't the fight. And just, you know what? They got it done for the fans. UFC 205.
What fans?
New York. They're giving them
the MSG, yeah.
Conor McGregor versus Eddie Alvarez, a title unification bout for Conor McGregor. He has the chance to become the first fighter to ever hold UFC titles in 2 weight classes at the same time. I mean, preliminary thoughts on that matchup.
I think it's fantastic for New York.
Oh, it is.
I mean, don't get me wrong. From a business standpoint, it's probably the best thing you know. God forbid an injury happens like it happened last time. But as far as a sport, I think it's like the most pathetic, the most worst thing I've ever heard in my life.
Well, we're gonna get into.
I hated it.
We're gonna get into that. I do gotta say this about UFC 205. I feel like they saw what happened with 200. That no matter how hard they tried to stack the card, there's just something missing that makes it just electric, like when you have a Conor McGregor or a Ronda Rousey. And I think they were really just trying to make up for that now, and they put together the biggest super fight that was on the table. So I think it's going to be fun. They also announced, like we talked about, Chris Weidman, Yoel Romero. So Chris Weidman, a New Yorker. Let's address the elephant in the room. The most famous UFC fighter from New York not competing, John Jones.
Really?
I mean,
that's not surprising to me, considering. I mean, had he been healthy and not
in controversy,
yeah, I mean, it would have made sense for him to main event that fight,
yeah, with
that
Cormier.
card. But I honestly, that like him even fighting at UFC 205 never even crossed my mind, to be honest with you.
He's got so much. I think certainly for the fans, I think it would be great to see him get himself together and come back. But I think that it's just one of those things, like, you're one of the best guys in the world right now, and this is happening in your hometown finally. How are you not the one there? So I think that just is worth mentioning, that we want to see him back. We want some updates on what's going on with his legal situation. I mean, he said maybe it's not such a long layoff. They're going to figure out with his drug testing, but we got to wait and see. But John Jones not going to be there, but they have just about everyone else. Like we said, Alvarez, McGregor, Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Karolina Kowalkiewicz, and then Tyron Woodley and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. That's just going to be a fun night. I know you and I want to talk about this, George, and certainly you, Chris Howard. Just the idea of McGregor still not wanting to defend the title, and that brings us to our next set of news. Jose Aldo saying, you know what, I'm sick of this. I want out of my UFC contract. It's just becoming a sideshow.
I don't blame him.
And I gotta agree. It's like, it's hard to just argue with the fact that this guy should have gotten an immediate rematch. And in any other UFC division, I think he would have gotten it. It's just that McGregor as a business for the UFC is so big that they're just feeding that monster right now while they can, while he's got a title. But I couldn't help but think, this is something the UFC almost has to address and just set a precedent, because it's getting to that point. Aldo, okay, well, is he going to want to fight, let's say, Max Holloway, while he's waiting for
He doesn't
Conor?
even mind fighting Max Holloway. He just wanted him to be for the UFC featherweight title and not the interim UFC featherweight championship.
Right. And I mean, that's another thing. Dana White said whichever belt that McGregor holds on to, it's going to be a short reign. So I take that to assume that McGregor is going to have to choose which weight class he stays at. And
You
the
would
other belt,
think, but obviously it's going to be like, I'm sure Dana White's like, well, let's see if you can become the welterweight champion now.
Well, it's not like boxing where, there's so many weight classes that you can kind of bounce around and it just seems to flow.
Yeah, 'cause they're all
you don't
like
keep track
two
of
pounds
it.
apart.
Yes, and that's one of the things that sometimes annoy me about Floyd Mayweather. It's like, technically he's not the champion, but we know he's getting, the A side. But okay, that's in the air. Let's just say it like it is. Do you think Jose Aldo will he be let go of his UFC contract? Will the UFC risk letting him go, or do you think they're going to make a deal to keep him in the organization? Chris Howard?
I think it's hard to say. I mean, it could go any way. But I actually get both sides because I know the UFC. I mean, they're chasing the bucks. It's like where's the money at?
No,
I'm kind of curious if whose essential decision it was, because I think in many ways maybe all the new owners, maybe they're like, well, we want to make our money back as quick as possible.
That's a good point.
So again, from a business side of it, I'm 100% on board, but again, from a sports side, I should have seen the writing on the wall when, and this is going to be a curveball out of left field, when they never even considering signing Brand Askren. Like, here is a guy who's one of the top fighters, undefeated in the world, one of the best fighters, but then they don't sign him because he's too boring.
Yes.
But then they'll give, and again, I'm a big wrestling fan, but then they'll give CM Punk like such a high profile fight. And again, I'm on the wrestling side. I get it, but it's like, so with that said, like, I can't blame guys like Jose Aldo or even Khabib Nurmagomedov for pretty much lashing out the UFC. Even guys like Mark Hunt. It's just like it's. From a business good, it's good, but it's like it's kind of in some ways making the UFC look bad. But the worst thing about it is it's like they don't even care.
Well, it's a stressful time, I'm sure. Whenever you get the sale of a company, there's a chance that anything could happen in that period of time where they could actually start losing or going under and tanking. So I'm sure that they're feeling a lot of pressure to play their best cards right now to give just to keep the momentum going in that period of the sale.
But I mean, again, it's one of those things where if they don't care, I get it. But don't get mad when you have a lot of these top fighters kind of lashing out on you. You know what I mean? Like, you can't have it both ways. You can't sit there and do whatever it is that you want to do and still expect all the fighters to be happy about it.
No, it's their bed. They gotta and they gotta make it.
It's true. And here's the thing: when I break it down, you got a talented guy like Jose Aldo. I mean, he looked freaking amazing against Frankie Edgar, and you tell me that the UFC is going to risk letting him go to, let's say, somewhere like Bellator if he asked, like, hey, let me buy myself out of my contract or something. Or he says maybe even a new sport entirely, like, go play soccer. And it's like, just something has to be done. With Khabib, he's been out a while. He won his fight. You got to think he's not happy about maybe risking it in a matchup down the line with, let's say, the winner of Dos Anjos Ferguson coming up next month. So I think they have a lot of stuff they really got to work through.
Ultimately, as press, I think any press is good press for them. It keeps their name out there, and they'll for the UFC, they'll end up doing something with it. And to think that all these fighters will go over to Bellator is. I just don't see that happening. UFC is still the place to be.
It's true.
So even if you get a few that jump ship, it's not gonna rock the world of the UFC, in my opinion.
So all right, so we have a few quick points, but I want to just get you guys' opinion. I think should McGregor win at UFC New York, I think he chooses to go down to 145 and stay there, or at least until something new happens, just because he needs he has the more physical advantages there. But what do you guys think? Do you think
honestly, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, I honestly think that he cannot make 145 ever again. I think it's just his way of holding on to the title as long as he can, so he can say like, or so he can get the opportunity to become a two division champion at the same time. But I
so
really
you don't think
honestly,
he can hit that way?
after he bulked up to 170 and like as high as he could, because obviously he didn't even made it like 168. So he obviously went as high as he could. Honestly, think he's not gonna be able to make 145. I think he's gonna have like a cyborg situation where he won't make
just
weight.
Can't.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting perspective. I think that obviously his greatest strength is going to be at 145, but that may very well be the case.
Definitely. I think it's just tough. I mean, obviously it's McGregor's world. We're just watching it on pay-per-view apparently.
And it's like I think the thing that upsets me the most is that like I'd always like side with the UFC. I'm like, no, man, he's just a cash cow. Obviously they're gonna do, but it really is like it's his world, it's his company. Whatever Conor McGregor wants, that's what they're gonna. That's
and
what
also
they're gonna get.
think about this
you just gave him a name for a spin-off series of McGregor's World. Yeah, that's a good spin-off
He already has that Twitter account, the Mac Life, and all
and
that.
I like McGregor. I think he's such a great figure for the sport.
He's a great showman. I mean, he gets under my skin watching those promos sometimes. But man, I want to see him fight. It's a fun show, and I think you gotta acknowledge it. This is a year where the UFC didn't have their big crossover star who just is taking over the world, Ronda Rousey.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you want to keep your brand relevant in this time. So why not keep McGregor front and center? He is the biggest star outside of her. So, I mean, we got that to talk about. I mean, UFC Manila is canceled. BJ Penn had an injury.
I think BJ Penn shouldn't even bother trying to come back.
I agree.
I think it's like it's cursed.
Prime,
yeah. Not even that. It's like the first time it's like, oh, I didn't know I couldn't use an IV. Pre-fight, and it's like, dude, you have you're a professional fighter. I'm sure you have a team, that kind of can go over everything.
They give you a handbook, and you have a guy who tells you what's in the handbook to say, yeah, we can't do that. You can't do IVs. You can't do TRT. Not saying he is, but things like that. Right. We touched on it earlier. Anderson Silva. We're probably looking to see the Spider before the year's out. Or at least early next year. Do you guys think Gegard Mousasi probably for Anderson Silva?
Well, the big rumor is Anderson Silva versus GSP.
I mean, I can't see that for the... It would be amazing, but the same thing. Just too many physical advantages for the Spider. That's why GSP never signed it. When Anderson came back, they told GSP, you can have the fight with Anderson Silva. And he's like, I haven't even been training. And he's still the much bigger athlete.
I honestly think that GSP would have his number. I think
so? With the takedowns and well-roundedness?
I think all the weaknesses that Anderson Silva has, and we've seen it before against fights against Dan Henderson and Chael Sonnen, I think GSP would find a way to really take advantage of all those weaknesses, and I think it'd be too overwhelming for Silva. We've seen what Silva can do against wrestlers. I'm not putting Cormier against him because he was a lot bigger than Anderson Silva that day.
And also on 2 days' notice, no training essentially.
Yeah, but I think that GSP is so insanely good that he would know exactly how to pick apart Anderson Silva.
I think I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that.
You know what? I mean...
I've always
said Anderson Silva all day, but certainly GSP. If there was a guy who is just as talented, I've always felt it's St. Pierre.
Give Silva what he wants, but I'd like to see him face somebody who we all know that he can beat.
I agree with that.
So maybe Mousasi. I think he can beat Mousasi.
Yeah, they're going to give him a good matchup. I mean, Uriah Hall is still out there. He obviously got knocked out by Derek Brunson not too long ago, but on paper that would be a fun one. But guys, so the next show it looks like we're going to be covering, now that UFC Manila is canceled, will be November 5th, Dos Anjos versus Tony Ferguson in Mexico City. So definitely we'll see you guys next time. And until then, guys, where can they find you on Twitter?
You can find me at Chris Howard Live on Twitter and Instagram.
And you can find me at Hermoza, GHERMOZA, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. I never
Twitch?
snap. Yeah, I still am. You know what? This Tuesday, if I get the game on that day, this Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday, I will be streaming WWE 2K17.
There we go.
Nice.
We still need to play UFC 2. Take your bets, guys.
Figure something out. Here at AfterBuzz TV, we got the TVs, we got the cameras, we
Yeah,
got whatever
we
you
gotta
need.
know.
I'll bring the PlayStation 4. Hey, let's set it up.
I love it. Guys, Gabriel Gonzalez, you can find me on Twitter at Double G on TV. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.